This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch on this 4th of July. I'm Mark Martin. Today, an expensive Independence Day with inflation running high for food and fuel, along with flight delays at America's airports. The battle for the American mind, how parents are pushing back against progressive indoctrination of their children. Actor Zachary Levi has played in some major Hollywood productions, but in his own life, he needed healing from depression and childhood trauma. And how America's battle for freedom before the Revolutionary War began with prayer by men who did not even believe they could pray together. We begin now with an estimated 48 million Americans traveling this holiday weekend on the road and through the air. But as Dale Hurd reports, crowded airports and flight delays are creating chaos.
For many Americans trying to fly to a destination or just get back home this holiday weekend, it's been a nightmare.
My flight got canceled, but I didn't find out till I got to the gate.
The worst-hit airports, Atlanta's Hartsfield, New Jersey's Newark, and JFK in New York. It's been a surge in air travel the industry and the FAA apparently weren't prepared for. On Friday alone, the TSA screened nearly 2.5 million people, a record high since the start of the pandemic.
We are seeing an airline industry that is stretched. And it doesn't help that the FAA is also stretched.
Thousands of flights have been canceled and many more delayed.
I spent $656 on a ticket, and now I'm still trying to find a way to get home.
The Logans have been trying to fly out of Boston back to Michigan for a family reunion.
We got delayed on our first flight and we had to switch flights, and we're hoping it doesn't happen again because we have stuff to do and we want to get home.
The airline industry and the White House are now pointing fingers at each other. The airlines blame the surge in flight cancellations on the FAA, a claim the Transportation Secretary disputes.
There are some things you can't control, like weather, but there are a lot of things that the airlines can and should control to make sure that they can service the tickets that they're selling.
Meanwhile, fears that dry conditions in the West will lead to wildfires sparked by fireworks, like this one near Houston.
Between 1992 and 2015, there were about 7,000 accidentally started fires on the 4th of July.
The risk has prompted cancellations of fireworks shows in many Western states. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Even as Americans celebrate the 4th of July today, inflation certainly isn't taking a holiday. It's the most expensive Independence Day in decades, as people are paying more for essential items like food and gas than they have since the early 1980s. Brody Carter brings us that story.
On Independence Day, we celebrate the country's break from England in 1776 to gain freedom. Surging prices and tightening budgets, however, are making financial freedom in 2022 more difficult.
We don't know what to do because the prices are increasing every single day.
I just think the gas prices are ridiculous.
In keeping track of your budget, you've no doubt noticed the impact of higher prices. That reality is spreading as consumer sentiment sits at its lowest point since researchers started tracking that feeling in 1952. Joel Griffith with the Heritage Foundation.
Regardless of whether we end up in technically a recession, the bottom line is that for the majority of American families, they're experiencing a real decline in their standard of living.
There are three holidays, there are three moments when Americans take to the roads and when Americans buy more food than at any other time of the year: Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July weekend.
Pollster and political consultant Frank Luntz warning Americans that July 4th demand for gas, food, and travel could set off inflation fireworks.
The Biden administration is afraid of the political impact, so they're downplaying the personal impact. And the truth is they should be candid.
The government's measure for inflation, the Consumer Price Index, shows average prices rose 8.6% over last year. A daily reminder of that pain coming at the pump, with gas roughly $5 a gallon, some states averaging well over that.
If you're a family with multiple children, you add on that travel cost along with the food cost and lodging too. A lot of hotels are up 20-something% year over year.
And when the music fades and everyone heads home, many Americans will likely face a harsh reality.
And the typical family, a middle-class family, is seeing close to a $3,000 pay cut over the past year or so. because inflation is outpacing wage growth. We're going to see the impacts from the massive government spending on the inflation front. We're going to see that for years to come.
The Federal Reserve faces an audacious goal to try and tame surging costs. And Federal Chairman Jerome Powell acknowledges if interest rates go too high too fast, we could be headed towards a recession. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Coming up, taking God out of classrooms and replacing him with drag queens. Schools have been an incubator for the left's radical ideas for nearly a century. In a bombshell new expose, Fox News' Pete Hegseth reveals that it's all part of their plan. He'll take us into the battle for the American mind when we come back. Welcome back to Newswatch. From critical race theory to gender fluidity, parents are pushing back against the progressive indoctrination of their children. Fox News' Pete Hegseth says our society is in a battle for the future of the American mind. Gary Lane has the story.
A French teacher dressed in drag struts his stuff before students at a Wisconsin high school. In Michigan, State Attorney General Dana Nessel mocks conservatives during a civil rights summit, saying that drag queens are not a problem for kids seeking a good education.
Drag queens make everything better. Drag queens are fun. Drag queens are entertainment. And you know what I'll say that was totally not poll tested? I say this, a drag queen for every school.
In school districts throughout America, parents are demanding that teachers stop instructing children about gender fluidity and critical race theory. They also want pornographic materials removed from school libraries. The authors of the new book, Battle for the American Mind, Uprooting a Century of Miseducation, say socialist beliefs like these weren't introduced overnight. They started creeping into U.S. public schools more than 100 years ago.
It happened gradually, and then it happened suddenly, as Hemingway would put it.
Best-selling author Pete Hegseth is co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. His co-author, David Goodwin, is president of the Association of Classical Christian Schools. They write that educational reformer John Dewey advocated progressive teaching in the 1920s. And in 1935, after they fled Nazi Germany, Marxists from the Frankfurt School of Social Research introduced their views to students at New York's Columbia University.
These were all atheists. These were all socialists, or almost all of them were. And their goal was social change. And they knew the schoolroom was the place they could do it. And it started with the removal of God.
David Goodwin believes the biggest change sidelining Christian education occurred when the U.S. Supreme Court, under Chief Justice Earl Warren, removed God from the classroom.
They gradually took prayer out of school. They then took the Bible out of school, and they then forbid really any teaching of Christian instruction in school. But that was the kind of the capstone of a long effort. It wasn't the beginning, it was really the end.
Also, Goodwin and Hegseth contend that progressives intentionally replaced classical Christian education with American nationalism.
We look at our Pledge of Allegiance, at least we do as conservatives and patriots, and say, hey, that's a great thing, under God. Well, the original pledge was written in the late 19th century by a socialist who ultimately wrote it without under God, because the pledge was meant to shift kids away comfortably from God at the center of the classroom, the cross at the center, to the flag at the center of the classroom, which was an easier sell to parents at the time. And now, of course, fast forward to today, and they're happy to get rid of the flag.
As journalists, we deal every day with the political, but beyond politics here, it seems there's a well-devised strategy that is really a spiritual one. What do you think?
You see, we fight in terms of politics now and may win incremental battles here or there. What the left understood is they had to go at the heart of what made us who we are. What do we value? What's our vision of the good life? What do we consider our virtues? And when they targeted that, they targeted at the foundation of who we really are, really the current underneath the top waters of the stream. If culture's the top waters, the current is paideia underneath, and they targeted that.
Yes, I think if we turn to Ephesians 6, it's a great chapter that kind of encapsulates the responsibilities and the upbringing of pretty much all the classes of society at the time. But it says, fathers, raise your children in and there's a whole bunch of words that are used there, education, instruction. The two that are most commonly used are fear and admonition. all of those are derived from the one word paideia. So it's a command of our Lord to raise children in the paideia of the Lord.
But many parents who want to raise their children up in the way of the Lord are finding they cannot afford classical educational alternatives during this challenging period of skyrocketing inflation. Many Americans have to choose between putting gas in the tank or food on their tables. How can they afford it?
It's a fair point. I'm going to start as a parent who has 3 of my kids and soon all 7 of them in classical Christian education. And I'll tell you, first and foremost, it's worth every dime. And I'll have to sacrifice in any other place to make sure they can afford it. I will. I will say, first of all, look inside your life and the things you spend money on, the things you value, and how much is the hearts, souls, and affections, how much are your kids' affections worth in your mind? Kids deserve to go to a school that reinforces what you believe and teaches them to be free thinkers. Education should be issue number 1. If you love God and you love this country, how we train up the next generation will determine whether we have a republic or not in future generations. Because right now we're pumping out kids who don't know God and hate America, and their minds are captured by indoctrination. That will not perpetuate a free society.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
The book is called Battle for the American Mind, and it's available wherever books are sold. Still ahead, from suicidal to superhero, actor Zachary Levi talks about the trauma of his childhood, his battle with depression, and the role of a lifetime. It's all right after this. Thanks for staying with us. Zachary Levi is well known for his roles in Shazam, American Underdog, and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Now he's using his fame as a platform to tell his personal story and to shed light on the issue of mental health. The actor sat down with Ephraim Graham to talk about his childhood trauma, his healing, and how it all led to the role of a lifetime.
Shazam? From superhero.
I don't know where we go from here. I don't know what comes next, but this, we did this.
To Super Bowl champ.
Yeah, man, I know who you are. I'm Kurt.
Zachary Levi lands larger-than-life acting roles quite regularly.
How would you describe the childhood or the life of Zachary Levi Pugh?
How much time you got? I mean, I think like most kids, in the moment, when I was a kid, it was normal. There wasn't anything, particularly traumatic or that I could point to and say like, oh, I'm living a traumatized life. You don't realize that until far later in life, hopefully. A lot of people don't ever realize that. Looking back on it, I can assure you an incredibly traumatizing childhood. There was just lots and lots of unhealthy, toxic behavior that was going on. Again, I could tell you that there were things that were making me cry on a regular basis or things that I was afraid of on a regular basis. But I didn't necessarily see those as being anything other than, well, I guess this is normal. I guess this is what other kids probably deal with as well, So that would be, a snapshot into my life, I suppose.
What do you think childhood for you did to your adulthood?
Young Zach was this, I don't know, little boy kind of just lost in a sea of estrogen between my sisters, my mom, my aunts, my grandma. But fortunately, this is the grace of God, not just the grace of God, but the plans of God, I figured out very early on in life, probably around 4, was when I was first truly cognizant of the idea that I could make someone laugh intentionally. Before that, every kid makes people laugh accidentally. You don't know why. Around 4, I think I was finally smart enough to go, oh, I can do this thing. I can do X or Y, and that will make somebody laugh. And I also knew, because I think at 4, you're emotionally intelligent enough to know that a laughing, smiling person feels good. And I never, ever wanted to stop doing that. I was immediately called to, addicted to, not realizing also that because I was lost in this world and trying to find identity and worth and value and all that jazz, I was both, fulfilling a calling, I think, in my life, but also figuring out very quickly how to run away from metabolizing my pain, figuring out how to be the clown, be the guy, bring the happy, bring the joy.
You don't have a tape in here, but it's digital.
Being a quick study earned Levi a starring role early and an escape from real life. abuse, a mom with mental struggles, and an absent father.
I was running from pain my whole life. I was running from pain. I'm grateful that I was able to find what I loved to do and what I was good at doing at such a young age, because I think a lot of people don't. Even though that was also something that was, I think, insulating me from doing a lot of the work that I needed to do that eventually led me to having a massive breakdown later on in life.
He shares his story with us and even more in his memoir, Radical Love, Learning to Accept Yourself and Others.
You talk about going from suicidal to superhero and then suicidal again. Take me back to the rock bottom moment. What happened?
I felt like I was failing, ultimately. Like most of my life, I've felt like a failure, even though from the outside it looks like, oh, I'm very much succeeding. But I'm not succeeding on the level that I feel like I'm supposed to or that I was called to.
She's a little artsy. With music, Broadway, the big and small screens on his resume, he left Hollywood.
With a head full of steam and dreams, I moved out to Austin, and I didn't know anyone out there. And all of a sudden, after 15 years of living in Los Angeles and having community and support structure and all of those things, I was now, Geronimo, let's go. Oh, wait a minute, now I'm alone. Oh, wait a minute, this isn't happening the way that I felt like God was calling me out here to do this. And why aren't the doors opening? Oh my gosh, I have blown up my life. I have now entirely failed my life. There is no coming back from this failure. I would say if suicide is climbing a 10-rung ladder, I was at rung 9. And thankfully, I have family and friends that surrounded me, supported me, were there for me, and just enough for me to get up and go to therapy, this life-saving therapy. But it was a perfect storm. But it was 37 years of lots and lots and lots and lots of trauma, unhealed trauma. A real testament of how I think, God works and what we ought to prioritize. I was not prioritizing the most important thing, which was to actually invest in myself and to care for myself and love myself, because I didn't understand that. So to go away and do this therapy, finally, and really figure out, oh my gosh, I haven't loved myself my entire life. I've never even understood what that meant. And also, this feeling that I feel inside that I felt my whole life, that's anxiety? Oh, I'm glad I finally know what anxiety is.
Therapy began his healing, a rebirth of his faith, and the role of a lifetime.
Say my name. Shazam literally happened while I was still finishing up my therapy, but only, because God was like, good, now you've done the thing. Now I can give you the blessing. You would have self-destructed had I given you this blessing before you did the work. And that's the work.
So how does it feel sitting here now, knowing I think at one point I'm reading that you felt you lost God and he was gone?
Oh, man. And I was driving around in Austin recently, driving up this road that was kind of near the house that I was staying in when I was having this breakdown in this cilantro restaurant where I was having this breakdown. And I was driving by it, and it just all flooded back. I was like, oh, wow. I remember being right here and thinking there is no hope. And there's no way I'm moving beyond this. There's no way I'm going to live beyond this month. And I was very much alive, and I was very much living my dreams as I was now driving by the same road. And I was so grateful. Oh, man, so grateful that I didn't do something so stupid and so drastic. And that I get to sit here and talk about this book that hopefully, if nothing else, helps at least one person walk through the flames that I was able to get through.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Washington, D.C.
Zachary Levi's book is called Radical Love, and you can find it wherever books are sold. Coming up, America's battle for freedom began with prayer by men who did not even believe they could pray together. You don't want to miss this story, and we'll have it for you when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. When the leaders of the American colonies came together before the Revolutionary War to discuss their fight for independence against their British overlords, their first business wasn't war, it was prayer. Paul Strand tells us about their first gathering in Philadelphia and how it was under God.
Feeling the lash of British oppression, colonial representatives first met at Philadelphia's Carpenter's Hall in 1774. But no one was sure how to begin a Continental Congress. Firebrand Samuel Adams jumped in with a controversial proposal.
Let's open in prayer. Isn't that amazing? America is opened up with a proposal for prayer, and it begins with a debate over prayer. We can't pray.
Because historian Peter Lilback points out they were Catholics or Protestants from a wide array of denominations.
They never prayed together. They all thought they were from different religions. They thought we're biblical or we're true, and they're not.
Adams was a Congregationalist, basically a Puritan like those who under Oliver Cromwell fought a vicious civil war against England's Anglicans.
And the Puritans had chopped off the head of the Anglican Church. He's called Charles I the King.
But Adams made a revolutionary statement.
I can pray with any man who loves his God and loves his country. So here he is, a Congregationalist. And he says, I hear there's just such a man over in that church over there, the Anglican Church.
He proposed as pastor Jacob Duché open the Congress in prayer.
It was at that moment that Samuel Adams created the American ecumenical spirit, where in the public square we can walk over our denominational boundaries. Literally, if you will, he stepped over the aisle.
Duché came, but all dressed up in fancy priestly robes.
He came in his full pontificals, which meant he was really decked out with the very things that Puritans hated.
He held the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, which Puritans loathed. But then Duché began the reading set long ago for that day in the book. With a possible war looming, the Congress felt it was a totally prophetic moment, as the reading was from Psalm 35, about being loyal to an elder who suddenly betrays.
That we had been loyal to the mother country, and they're turning against us and harming us.
It started out, fight against them that fight against me. John Adams wrote his wife.
You would have thought in God's providence that was put into the Book of Common Prayer just for this day for us.
Duché's prayer then asked God for freedom from the rod of America's oppressor and ended in the name of Jesus Christ.
It's quite a remarkable moment that's where the American story began. In prayer, as opposite sides came together for a greater good in the name of Christ.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Carpenter's Hall, Philadelphia.
That's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. Or you can talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day and a wonderful Independence Day.